All right. It is October 17th, 2023, and we are here with two of my favorite people, married for quite some time. This is Peter and Deborah Roth. And as I mentioned in my email, they are both very spiritually oriented, but they have different paths. And I thought it would be super cool to talk to them about how those paths parallel, cross paths, how they work together, how they stay in integrity with each of their paths and not bump into one another too much. So I thought that would be a fascinating thing. We don't get couples very often, and especially on this topic. So I'll take my video off if we start to freeze. For now, I'll leave it on. And welcome, Peter and Deborah. So nice to have you.
Thank you. Great being here.
So fun to be here.
And I just found out that it is the eve of Peter's 81st birthday. You would never know it by looking at him.
Oh,
He
come
looks
on.
like a spry 68-year-old to me, but he's in great shape. I think probably all the running that he did as through his life probably contributed to that, but that's not the only thing. Because Peter, when it comes to healing toys, Peter has them all, and he's always the first one to have them.
Yeah.
So he has looked into health and wellness probably more deeply than anybody I know. Has tried every supplement. Has tried. I'm maybe exaggerating just a tiny bit, but really not too much.
You're close.
I'm pretty close, and he's got all the mechanisms, and we have some of the same toys.
Yes.
And
it's great visiting you because I feel right at home.
Yeah, so we Peter and I, look up on that. He's also been a teacher for decades of spirituality and has journeyed into many, many realms, knows and has a radio show and has does know now many of the luminaries that we are familiar with. Peter gets around. So that's Peter. And then Deborah. Deborah is such a soulful being. I met her through my dear friend, another friend. One night we sat next to each other, and it was like instant girlfriend, and she's one of the more sparkly people I know. She literally sparkles, and she wears little things in her hair that sparkle. She is like a fairy, but she has gotten into, for many years, aside from being an interfaith minister, and by the way, if you need a minister for a wedding, she's your gal. She goes above and beyond, and many people come to her and are thrilled to have had her as their minister. But she also she's into the divine feminine, which of course we are already also interested in. And we work with Mary Magdalene. In fact, Mary Magdalene came and paid us a visit last night. We work with a number of different feminine entities, and we're always very in tune with Gaia and all of that. So Deborah runs she has a whole bunch of things. I gave you her website on my email, so definitely look that up. Peter and Deborah, if you want to put in the chat your sites so that people have that in the here and now, because sometimes people save the chat to be able to refer back to later. Anyway, two incredible human beings who have made a life together and have some children and have some grandchildren who are delightful also. I've only seen pictures, but I just know they're delightful from their pictures. And so let's launch into this. Deborah, let's start with you. And why don't you give us a brief summary of how you came to the work that you do, and then also a little bit about what compels you in that work.
Great questions. No surprise. Thank you, Hope. It's so fun to be here with you and anybody that's in your orbit. So hi, everybody. You must be pretty fabulous too if you're connected to Hope. So I came to what I do now. Spirited Living is the name of my business and my website. And I am a life and relationship coach, an interfaith minister, and just have lots of things under that umbrella. And I came to that after, I don't know, it was so long ago, I don't remember how many years it was, some number of years in the corporate world. And in the mid-90s, I made a big shift and left that when our kids were little, our boys are little, who are now, which is completely blowing me apart, blowing away and apart. Our older one just turned 40. Our younger one will turn 37 next month. And when that was going on, I started my own business and did coach training and got ordained as an interfaith minister, all that stuff, and got my master's in psychology. And my master's thesis and my focus was on, it was a master's in psychology, but specializing in feminist psychology and women's spirituality. And at that point, started leading women's circles. I mean, everything happened at once. I started leading women's circles. I started coaching mostly women. I like to say I coach overwhelmed, under-nurtured women and a few good men through life transitions, because the 90s were a huge, so do the math, you'll figure out how old I am. The 90s were a huge transition decade for me. I mean, with kids that were born in the 80s and, you know, coming of age in the 90s and leaving my corporate job and all that. And so I've been doing some variation, some combination of all those things since then. I love doing, you know, really creative, unique, fun, different wedding ceremonies, and have done hundreds and hundreds of them since then. Also, I guess under the umbrella of interfaith minister, I do these women's circles, which you talked about, Hope, for 27 years. I started in 96 doing live circles at our Unitarian church. And I just did my last live circle on Sunday night, which is, yeah. I don't know that I've ever done anything other than raise kids, and I'm certainly not going to end doing them. But I don't know that I've ever done anything like that for 27 years. So that's been a big one. I continuing to do virtual circles. So that will feed my lunar soul. I'm a Cancer to begin with, but I think what's always compelled me, and this is kind of maybe an answer to your second question, Hope. What's always drawn me is this notion that we are cyclical creatures, and those cycles show up not just in the seasons. I mean, I do seasonal celebrations and rituals. I do, you know, these lunar ones. I do a full moon meditation on the phone every month, and these new moon meditations. But then my life coaching is very much, there is a cycle to transitions. You know, just like we always hear about the stages that you go through in grieving, there are stages, there are cycles that you go through when you're in the middle of a big life change too. And so that's been really powerful personally, but also professionally to be able to guide people through that. And then I just do lots of fun things. I'm a huge, huge proponent of self-care. I call it sacred self-centeredness, because it really is about being centered in our essence and, you know, and who we are. And I call that spot our circle of one. And the book that I wrote years ago, Circle of One, The Art of Becoming a Self-Centered Woman, really talks about it, brings all that kind of stuff together. And so, I definitely practice what I preach in that regard. I sing in a wonderful women's chorus and have for 12 years. That just singing totally feeds my soul. And I, part of a community garden, and I founded a charitable theater group. Wow, 15 years ago now, and we do art stuff out of my our productions out of my Unitarian church. So it's a very eclectic, very multifaceted existence, into which, integrating time almost every week, with our grand cuties. when our older one was born in 6.5 years ago, I said, they were in Brooklyn at that point. And I said, I'm going to get out there every week. And now they're in New Jersey. So now when I go out, I have a sleepover, and that's very delicious. And we have a little boy on the way with our other son and daughter-in-law. And then my on the other side of it, and I think there's probably some of you on this call maybe that are in that, cliched but very true sandwich generation. My mom is 93 and still going strong mentally. She's slowed down somewhat physically, but she lives on her own in Mystic, Connecticut. And I go up and see her once a month. So it's rich and full and a little crazy making sometimes, but and then Peter and I, who we met December 1, 1979, when I was about 5 years old. And it's been, the way I describe our marriage on my website is that it's dynamic and growth producing. And I feel like we have stretched and grown each other in so many amazing ways. And we continue to, even after, 40 plus years. So you can tell I'm an easy talker too, but I'll
No,
that was
beautiful. That was beautiful. Great summary of all the many facets. You are a multifaceted person for sure. And okay, well, that was awesome. Now let's hop over to Mr. Peter here and unmute yourself and tell us the same thing. But you have to be a little, mindful, because Peter has a very long story, but because he's lived the length that he has, but he's experienced so much.
He has a long story because he's so much older than me.
So old. You mean old.
So Peter, give it to us in a chunk, my friend.
I don't even know where to start. I recently did a 2-hour interview about my life with Laura Eisenhower. And I think you saw it, right?
Yes.
And I started out saying, well, my life got very interesting. As soon as I was born, I died. And that really launched me, because I went into, and I had a near-death experience. And babies who have those have been researched as adults, and it's been shown that they're not normal people. So
well, that explains everything.
yeah, so I'm not normal. A good deal of my life had to do with running, and one of the founders of the New York Marathon. One of the proudest things is I'm a grandfather of disabled runners, and I got them started. No amputees had ever run before till I got hold of them, and now they're all over the place. So I'm proud of that. And then I have, I started off not realizing how much intuition I had, and I was just using it a lot. And it kind of, and I was in wonder, like, how do I know this? How do I know that? How do I know this? And and things happened. One time Dan Winters, a famous mathematician and geometrist, and I went to somebody's living room where he was visiting New York, and I was asked to, visit, because they knew I was a fan of Dan's. But I also know to keep my mouth shut, because around Dan, you really have nothing to say, because he just is so complex. So I'm sitting next to him and trying to mind my own business, listening to him. And all of a sudden the universe says, we have something to tell him. And I said, leave me alone. And they said, no, you have to interrupt him and tell him what we have to say. And finally I agreed to it, and I tapped him on the shoulder. Dan, I'm getting information that I'm told you can use. And I told him, and then he said, oh my gosh, I've been waiting years for this. And then 20 minutes later, he asked me to teach a workshop with him, which was crazy. And we did. And it turned out that the universe at that point, during the workshop, fed me with the ability to translate him to the audience.
Oh.
And I was able to do that. And as they were leaving, they said, "Thank God you were there. We didn't understand a word he said." So, so those are experiences I had to really understand that, I'm working with strange tools. And then another thing that I only really realized recently is that 25 years ago, I was very involved with these powders from the Mount Shasta area. And there were different colors and they were sacred powders. They contained monatomic rare earth minerals. And I was able to download information about them to the people out there from New York. I was on the phone with people and helping them understand the powders. And then one evening I was on the phone with a woman who owned a big ranch out there, 1,200-acre ranch. And while I'm on the phone with her, I hear that she has powerful rocks on her property. And it's like, I asked her, "Do you know anything about it?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, I guess you're going to go out on your property now and you're going to find a collection of powerful rocks in some location on your property that you hadn't noticed before." And she called me the next day and she said, I found them. And it turned out it was pieces of glass, leftover glass. This is a small piece. I have many larger pieces. And so it turns out it was leftover glass from the gold rush era of a bottling company that was making whiskey bottles for the gold rush miners. And they used the powders for the glass. So the glass was very sacred glass. And when they went out of business, they left all this leftover glass called slag on her property, which is where they had worked. And so it turned out that these are now the most powerful crystals on the planet. And she is a legend for having discovered them. And she sent me many pounds of them right away. And I think I gave you one, didn't I? Hope.
Yes, and tell them what the name of them are.
Andara crystal, Andara crystal. You can find them on the internet. And so I'm so grateful. And I think a lot of my consciousness and intuitive abilities increased dramatically when those rocks arrived here at my house. And I've been surrounded by them for the last 25 years. And I think they did a lot to my psyche. And my higher psyche. And so I'm grateful for that in many ways. So the difference between my work and Deborah really is that I'm just kind of flying in the universe all the time. She's very grounded in her ceremonies and rituals and stuff like that. I always tell people I'm ritually challenged. So and I've had I had 5 lifetimes in Tibet. 2 of them were with the Dalai Lama, and in this lifetime, the Dalai Lama actually, when he was in New York and I was in a big crowd, he sought me out to remind me of our lifetimes together, and that was awesome. And my last lifetime was in India. I was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, and so I come from good stock. and so I'm just very I'm a receiver of information, and years ago I started teaching in my school about 26 years ago. And the reason I became a teacher was that I was receiving so much valuable information all the time that it was valuable. And so the school was very successful and still is going, weekly classes. And Ginny and Linda have been in my classes. So it's really, it's been fun in this life. There's so many things I could talk about, because I have my podcast that I've had for 18 years, weekly podcast, and been interviewing many, many, many luminaries, including yourself. And it's wonderful. And I've gained a lot of wisdom from them, because most of them are authors, and I read their books, and I'm into the essence of their work. So they love the interviews only because I'm someone they can really talk with. And so I treasure that. It's still happening. And now I don't know what else. Oh yeah, another thing. This is what's new, and it's very, very, very unusual. Starting May 15th, I started receiving visitations at night, and each visitation would begin by the bed vibrating very strong, like not zzz, but pounding kind of, and then I would ask who's here, and I would receive, I would have visitors. So first time it was two men and a woman. They were from Inner Earth, and they said they had come to activate me so I could visit them, because you can't really get down to Inner Earth unless you're at a very high frequency, and they needed to push my frequency up so I'd be capable of visiting them. So I haven't visited them yet, but since then, well, overall, they've visited me 26 times. And each time with different purposes and different people. And sometimes it's just to work on me, on my vibrations, on my do healing work on me. And other times it's for information about them, to understand them, to, and to know what my purpose is with them. It's not just to visit them, but they have a very important work for me to do with them for humanity. And so I'm very excited about that. And I'm kind of like an emissary of theirs once I visit them. And even now, because they've visited me so many times. And I love it. Sometimes with all these visitations, sometimes I think I'm just a tourist attraction for them, because each time is usually different people, sometimes in twos or threes. And they're always valuable visits, but it's like, I think they go out of their way to have an excuse to visit so they can be tourists up here. So that's kind of cool. So I don't know how soon I can go down there. I know my frequencies are very, very high right now. And I have to live carefully with them because of that kind of altitude. So I'm working with the FLFE company. Hope you're familiar with them.
You told me about that.
Yeah, the Focus Life Force Energy people are out west, and they send high frequencies to your home, and 24/7. So you can sign up with them, and it's actually a 2-week free trial. And if you go to flfe.net, you can sign up for a free 2-week trial. And they're wonderful people, advanced consciousness themselves. And they're helping me. Like, I have to have a unique nutrition for this, for living in, like this, and, take care of myself. And the biggest thing I find is that at this level of consciousness, I don't want to tread down. I really want to be in environments that are upscale, conscious wise. And because the lower consciousness levels on the planet are all about fear, anger, you know, trouble.
Yeah.
And so people who live in with those elements in their lives are of lower consciousness. And the idea is to, you know, come forth from the feelings of your heart chakra rather than the third chakra.
Right. Right.
And yeah. And
So
so yeah.
so I'm glad you mentioned that about inner earth, middle earth, because that will help to, when I'm now going to ask Deborah, you know, to have a spouse who is going to visit inner earth. Let's talk about that. Where does, where does that sit with you being the earth mama that you are, and the grounded one, as Peter said, and how do you manage that?
It's pretty freaky. And I just hold it for where it is. I don't, and you were saying at the very beginning, Hope, about how there aren't a lot of times, and we've done it in the past, where we integrate, where we teach together, do that kind of thing. I feel like more often, and not in a bad way, not in a separatist way, but I think we're definitely more on parallel paths, as opposed to being, we've got really dear friends, and you know them, Alexander and Vicky, who are very integrated. They're very much a couple in the work that they do together with the playing cards and source cards, as they call them. And Peter and I we're pretty separate in our paths. And it sometimes that causes friction, because you and he are on a same wavelength in that regard than I am. I completely appreciate it. And I think one of the things that I do that's helpful is I can, because I'm more grounded. His astrology chart is like all air. I don't have a whole lot of earth in my chart, but I'm definitely, because of the earth-centered ritual that I just, for a lot of reasons, I'm definitely more, on solid ground. That he doesn't always listen to me, but I will often suggest language in ways that he can talk about this, that people can hear, kind of like what he was doing with Dan Winter, that translate what Peter's doing into kind of common language, or point out to him, and we've certainly run up against this as well with our kids, but with other people, when it's just simply not appropriate to talk about this stuff with, the mass population. There's just no orientation, and you don't accomplish anything by doing that. And so I think for both of us, that's been kind of a growth process, because he has so much great information, and you've got to find the very tender middle ground where the people who would be open to it can hear it and want to know more, and without totally freaking out those that are curious. But if somebody comes, if someone presents it in a way that's too wacky for them, they'll like run the other direction. And he's got so much great stuff to share in that regard. I feel like I'm sometimes, he might say, a damper, but a translator. I like that phrase that that he used in terms of him with Dan Winter, so that people can hear him. It's not just about him talking about his experience. How can you talk about it in a way that people can take it in at whatever level they're at? And it's something I had to learn, and I don't do half the far out stuff that he does, but early on I was so self-conscious about talking about my ritual work and my goddess work, and all the minorly woo-woo stuff that I was doing, and so worried about the people wouldn't take me seriously, or they'd think I was off the deep end. And then there was just some shift, and I don't know what created it, where it was the realization, and I think it's important, and I run into this more, I have to say, than I think Peter does. He is very firmly ensconced in the alternative world. I am much more of a bridge person. I mean, I was in the corporate world. I mean, I walk in both worlds, pretty easily, really. But to be able, for me, my big, and he's been a real teacher for me around that. One of my big lessons in the world has been to get that not everybody is going to be into the stuff that I'm into, and not to focus. And any of you who have ever given workshops or taught or anything like that, when you get feedback, of course, 99% of the people say, oh, she's wonderful. And then there's one person who says, oh, I didn't. And that's the one that gets in your head. And there was a point when our boys were little where I had this shift at a soccer parents potluck, talking about what I was doing, and noticing, actually watching a third of the group, when somebody asked me what I was doing, a third of the group, eyes glazing over, they just didn't know what to do with me. Another third of the group, that curious group that I was just talking about, that, oh, what's that about? And that's the group you really want to, it's like, oh, okay. And then the other third, it's like, oh yeah, my sister gave me a tarot deck for Christmas, whatever. But for me, the learning, and this is where Peter's been certainly ahead of me on that spiritual path, is not focusing on the ones whose eyes glazed over and drifted away. And at the same time, not being judgmental about them, not saying, oh, they're just not as evolved as me, that's okay.
I don't do
There
that.
you are this time around. No, I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying, for me, the lesson was is to just get where they're at, and not make any proclamations about what that said about them. It's okay. I'll focus on the other 2/3 that had either a small interest or like we're diving in with both feet.
I think this is so, I love that you're talking about this, and because we can extrapolate this out to a larger conversation, right? About how to hold these varying viewpoints and this varying interest level.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Well, one way that I like to look at it, since I'm very involved with the source cards, which are the structure of life, and Deb is born, because we all have birth cards and personality cards, and so her birth card is a 2 of clubs, and my birth card is a 4 of clubs. Well, the 2 of clubs is very interested in interacting. It's all about relationship with others. That's what the 2 is about. And clubs are the mind. So for her, it's all about how people are thinking and how she's thinking and how they interact. And that's one reason why she's so good with vocabulary, why her language is really important, because of her interactions are so important. Whereas I'm a 4 of clubs, so I don't think that way, because the 4 of clubs is 4 squared. I just want to get to the truth of what's going on, and I'll say it whatever way feels comfortable to me.
You either get it or you don't.
Yeah, this is the box that I'm holding of what truth I'm living with, and so that's our birth cards. Now, what's interesting is that our personality cards are that she's a 7 of spades and I'm a jack of spades. Spades are consciousness, and so we're both living very spiritual lives, because consciousness is about spirituality. And the 7 is very mindful of up or down, because the 7 is a card that you can turn, it can go up or you can turn it over and it's down. So people who are 7 of spades, or any 7, are always conscious of playing up, and if you're 2 of clubs, you're conscious of how are you playing for good interaction? How are you having acceptance? How are you, how are you making everybody happy? It's because it's playing it up. So her consciousness is all about playing it up, so she can be successful doing what she's doing and saying what she's saying. Whereas I'm a jack of spades, so I'm not interested in that. The jack is the prince of the kingdom, and is so in this context is the prince of consciousness, and is also the jack in the box, because jacks are, as a prince of the kingdom, we don't have a real job except king in waiting, so we just explore and experiment, and always coming up with new things and new directions, and it can be frightening to people to be around a jack in the box. And I'm used to being, unusual and
Used to frightening people.
yeah, well, how you see it, I just see it as creating an opportunity, and and so I love being a jack of spades, because it has great blessings to it, and it really is an opportunity to explore consciousness in any way possible.
Fascinating. Fascinating to compare your cards like that.
Yeah, it really explains us.
It does. And I love that that tool is there, because it's almost like, well, it would be not unlike having your astrology charts side by side to sort of explain similar things, but in a maybe more complex way. And I love the fact that you chose a person who would literally keep your feet on the planet.
I knew
Right?
that right away, because when I met her, she was corporate, and she was living a very normal lifestyle, and I needed that because I was so unusual. But it was good for me, but for her, nobody was happy that she found this strange guy.
Yeah,
At the same time, I just want to say, at the same time, given the card of 7 of the leveling up, being with you really must have opened many windows.
Totally, completely. I mean, there were things I dabbled in things that were weird in high school and a little bit in college, but I mean, Peter took me to my first astrologer like a month after we met. And I'm now an astrologer, but that was, among the many things that I do. Yeah. I mean, and I say that to my couples all the time. So when I marry people, one of the questions I ask is, to tell me what they love about each other. And I would have to say at least 80% of the couples I talk to say they complement each other. And which is a nice way of saying that they're very different in some ways. And I just kind of smile and say, yeah. And I feel like Peter and I are great examples of that. On our good days, we stretch and grow each other. On our bad days, we want to strangle each other. Because those differences can just be like,
Yeah,
right in your face. She needs to be
so grounded, and and she's not happy with my far outness.
I appreciate it, but there's times that because that's not the world I live in day to day, but I'm in it,
you are in it.
Yeah.
So it's very let's take this to, I'm thinking about the people on this call and ways in which we're interacting out in the world. And to some degree, I mean, we're all out there, up there, floating around depending on the person, right? We have more or less sort of woo-woo going on within us. And we're interacting with people who are in that third group. Maybe we could break it down that way. And I just, I like the way the way that you, Deborah, have a sort of, don't pull the horse to the trough, because right, we know that old story really, really well. This is about seeing where there's connection, where there is the potential to speak your truth. I know for myself, I came back from Findhorn when I was 21, and I was woo, and I was trying to communicate with people, my friends at home, and say, y'all, there's this other way to live. It's the coolest thing ever. And they looked at me like I had lost my marbles. And
Yeah.
I got very tight-lipped after that.
Yeah.
And it took me a couple of years. It wasn't until about 4 years later when my Dinner with Andre came out, and I realized that Andre Gregory was at Findhorn when I was at Findhorn. I had had lunch with him. I couldn't figure out how I recognized the man. I'm
Oh.
thinking he's an actor. Maybe I've seen him in something. He's up there on the screen. No. Then he starts talking about being at Findhorn and putting the rocks on the roof, which is what I did. And I realized, oh my God, that's where I met him. And I realized, okay, if this giant head can be on a screen talking about Findhorn, maybe I can loosen up a little.
Yeah.
But why is this all relevant now? It's because we're in a time when, I personally want to become even more vocal about these things, whether we take the path of divine feminine and communication and all of that, or we take the path of higher consciousness, contact with beings, whatever it is. Our world is thirsty for something, something true, that box that Peter talked about, something true that you can hang on to. And I'm just feeling inspired by both of you in the ways that you go out, each in your individual way, to address these truths and sprinkle these truths out there, and because I think there are a lot of really hungry people,
Well, and I will say, Hope, and we haven't had a chance to really deeply catch up since we saw each other this summer, but on literally on the heels, the same day that I made the decision to let go of my new moon circles, my live new moon circles, this other experience that a dear friend of mine had introduced me to a couple weeks before really just kind of exploded in my life. And I feel like it fits what you're talking about, that criteria of something that everyone can relate to, that even those who like those of you on the call who are exposed and who are open to these conversations about higher consciousness. I mean, one of our sons says, "Don't talk to me about consciousness." It's like our sons, and they love us, they love Peter, but this is hard for them. Our
Sure
kids dealing with that, and I think so this new experience, this new project that I've gotten involved with is called the Chair of Joy. And when it was introduced to me, my first response, and I am well known as a little Mary Sunshine Pollyanna type, and my response was unexpectedly cynical, which was, Chair of Joy? Isn't that a little out there? Why a chair? Why are we talking about joy at a time like this when the world is just so, challenging, to put it nicely? And then it, as I worked through my own stuff with it, realized that's, even if joy is the epitome, and we can't always, if you're having a difficult moment, a stressful moment, you can't always access a moment of joy, but you can find a way, even if you can't, even if you don't have higher consciousness beings talking with you, or intuition or Mary Magdalene flowing, coming through, you can access a space of peace and calm within you. And there are lots of tools. We know that there's lots of tools out there that let us do that. But this particular one, I don't know. I never know when I'm going to show something, whether because I did this on my YouTube video today. But this is, oh yeah, oops, it comes backwards, right?
Sit, breathe, think, feel.
Yes, that's the 4 steps of the Chair of Joy. So anybody can do it. And I went to 2 events with the founder in Trenton, New Jersey, which is a pretty depressed area, and had literally everyone from ministers and therapists and police detectives to burly maintenance men come in with, and the 2 of us, I'm here with this founder, to sit in the Chair of Joy and to go through this sit, breathe, think, feel. And watching the responses was so extraordinary, so from the heart. Men in tears and women, bringing them to places, because the essence of it is to remember a moment of joy. I mean, if we have time, and if we don't, that's fine. It's like 3 minutes to go through it, and I've led it with a bunch of people. But it's finding, for me, and this is helpful to articulate it here too, because I'm just now really figuring out, and I'll put the website in the chat too, for if people want to learn more about it. To find something, to find not only language, as Peter talked about, but tools that are universally, if not understood, at least that people can be open to. Even if they have a first response, a cynical response like mine was, and I am so not a cynic, but realizing and remembering that, one of my core values for 25 years, I articulated when I first started coaching, one of my core values is joy. So why did I have a response like that? And there's neuroscience, all the stuff that we love, Hope, around meditation and gratitude. There's neuroscience that talks about what meditation, what gratitude, what joy do to the brain. And if we, as people committed on this call to making a change, it's not just about having wonderful teachers like you and like Peter or me, but how do we bring that out to the masses? What's the language we can use? What are the accessible tools that aren't too out there? But some of us need to be more out there, because that's how we get to a higher level of consciousness as a civilization, I believe, what you and Peter especially do. And then there's got to be the real grounded stuff. So yeah, it's quite
wonderful. Wonderful. That's very, very cool. I'm happy to hear about that and learn about that. These You Awake workshops that I've been doing now for a year with Gary Malkin. They're a 4-step process, and the last step is returning to joy. And there are some ways that we have to do that, but I'm very curious in this, so I'm going to look it up. I love it. I love it so much. Thank you for sharing that. Peter.
Yeah,
thoughts?
I want to actually, first, I just want to remember something that I did years ago that was very meaningful and important in my intuitive growth. Was for a year and a half, I took a day trip from New York up to Chester, Massachusetts, and back every Thursday for a year and a half. I was helping Mark Newkirk develop the light field machine, which is a machine that expands consciousness. And Hope, Freedom knows, Freedom was very involved with Mark, and still is, I think, with light field. And so Mark was very, I went up there with Lisa Denton, who's more clairvoyant than I am, and I would say more clairaudient. And so the 2 of us together would be a team to work with Mark to bring in new technology for the light field machine. And every time we would drive home together, we would remark how wonderful the experience was to show us how important our intuitive capacity is. And also, by the way, Freedom is an author who's been on my podcast, and it used to be called The Radio Show. And so she's written she's a wonderful author. And so, but that light field experience was very important in my life. And also, along with the Andara crystal, was part of expanding consciousness for me.
Yeah, and anybody who's in the Massachusetts area can sign up and go in for a session at Lightfield still, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if Freedom is on with us or not, but she knows all about it because she's still involved with them.
Yeah. Listen, we're getting close to the, do you want to speak about it, Freedom?
Sure, yeah. Lightfield's still going, and sometimes I'm up there as an operator. I'll be there November 3rd and 4th. And it's an amazing opportunity for people to go and de-stress and really clear their fields of the distortions. It's really an amazing thing that Peter and Lisa and Mark were able to create, and it's still going. So
yeah, and I've had over 100 Lightfield sessions, so I think that did a lot for me.
yeah, I did many myself, and
Sure.
I found that I became the person I had always wanted to be.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's quite an endorsement. Wow,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Well, I've only had one and I enjoyed it thoroughly. Leonora, you have a question?
Yeah, I have not been up at Lightfield, and it occurred to me earlier in the call, I said, oh, these people have to know about Lightfield, and there you are. So Peter, are you, what is your role up there? I'm really curious about the place. I don't own a car, and I want to find somebody with whom I could go.
Yeah, would you be driving from?
I live in Great Falls, also known as Turner's Falls, same town that Hope lives in.
Oh yeah, you're still in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's about going down 91 and across over to
We'll try to
Chester.
coordinate. We'll try to coordinate something.
Oh, great,
Yeah.
great. It's very much on my radar. There's so much happening in my life that I really can only call it cobwebs. Although, yeah, not all of my making, and I think they could be released. And then I went to the website about the crystals, the Andorra. Wow, there's one that says Andorra, Hawaii. So are these Andorra crystals found elsewhere?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think Andara, A-A-R-A, A-N-D-A-R-A.
Andorra, that's right.
Yeah.
I would love to buy one. Do you own one, Hope?
I
Oh,
do.
you were gifted one, or you have one, yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I don't sell them.
they're on Etsy. Somebody sells them on Etsy. Do you know whether that's a good source?
Well, I imagine I don't know. I just don't know the market about it. I know that at the beginning I received about 25 pounds of them, and I know they go for around $50 an ounce nowadays. So, but I in the early days I gave a lot of it away because I felt it would benefit so many people.
So is the woman on that property still collecting?
No, Lady Nellie has died.
And people go there and collect? What are the
No,
logistics?
I think it's been taken. It's all been sourced from there, and I don't know where any of it is now in any great amounts. So I don't really know the story about that. I didn't even know it was called Andara Crystal until I was on a Zoom call with Lowell Johnson, who's been to Inner Earth out there in Mount Shasta, from Mount Shasta down into Inner Earth. And I asked him, I said, you're out there a lot. So what do you know about this glass that I have? He said, oh my gosh, that's Andara crystal. And I told him the story about how I got it. And he said, yeah, that's Lady Nellie. And she was a legend for it.
And you guided her to collect them?
Yeah, she didn't know about them until she was on the phone.
Thank you, Peter. This was a great, a wonderful presentation, to use that cliche. Thank you, Hope, for bringing these guests to our screens.
Oh, thank you for
I'm very
saying that.
intrigued by the deep world that you are involved in, Peter.
Oh, it's beyond, you know, I just am grateful
Mm,
that somehow the universe is looking out for me. And I guess they've had a plan for me all my life to have an impact in the world.
yeah.
And
I
now,
guess so.
yeah, and now whatever, I know that Inner Earth, they've told me that they have big plans for me in the future as they come up to visit, that because they're crystalline people, they can't come up until the environment up here is lighter. So we have to get through this struggle
Wow.
and get, and then when they come up, they're not going to stay for long because they look different. They're about 8 feet tall. They've, we're carbon, they're crystal,
Mm,
and they're all about love and light. And their society is, they have 120 cities, and there's no conflict. There's no darkness. There's no, it's all high consciousness. And so when they come up, they're going to be representing that light and love. And yet they said that they don't want to be teachers. They don't want to be seen as new gods.
mhm.
They just want to show what it's like to be of light and love. And then let us who know how to speak with them telepathically convey about what it's like to live in a society that's all positive.
Yeah. Thank you. That's the big next step.
Mhm. That's
So
it.
I'm psyched to have that mission to be an emissary of theirs. And
Well, so are you here in Massachusetts because you're involved in Lightfield?
no, I live in New York City, and when I was involved with Lightfield, I took day trips.
Uh-huh.
I almost never stayed over up there. And Deb and I went together a few times and even stayed over. But generally, each week I would drive up to Brookfield, Connecticut to pick up Lisa. And then together we drive up to Chester. And then at the end of the day, I'd drive back to Connecticut, drop Lisa off, and come back to New York City.
Well, they do have meditations every Sunday.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm still on the mailing list, and it's a big trip for me now. I don't travel as easily right
Yeah.
now in my
No, I said that for the
elderly.
other people who are on the call. In case
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it's a great community.
I don't want to take any more airspace, but I hope other people are also interested in this. It's very important work.
Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful and very advanced.
Mhm.
Anybody else have some questions for these two lovely souls?
No
Just
question.
good wishes. Stick around.
Well,
Freedom has a question.
sure.
I'm curious, Peter, about your near-death experience as an infant. What?
I was born a blue baby. I had to be resuscitated, and I didn't know I had a near-death experience, but I've always been different. And I interviewed, what was her name? PMH Atwater.
Oh, yes, yep.
Yeah, and she researched adults that knew they had to be resuscitated as babies, and found that they were all very unique people.
Mm.
So plus I had these past lives with his in Tibet, and I must have had years in retreat when some of these lifetimes in Tibet.
Right.
And who knows where I traveled when I was in those caves.
Mhm.
So I don't meditate. I mean, I've had some profound meditations in this life, but I'm not a meditating person. And I say that's because I had all these years of extreme meditation that I'm kind of worn out from it. And now I'm using the results of it.
That makes sense.
Plus, I have the opportunity of, for instance, of all those sessions at Lightfield to help me keep my
Yeah.
consciousness high. I do want to mention, I have a new doctor that I'm working with who really is amazing for people in need. He's a PhD in radionics. And I've sent dozens of people to him with all kinds of trouble, physical trouble. And he's a genius. He lives in Delaware. You send him your picture, and his radionics machine can identify everything in your body that doesn't belong there and eliminate it through frequencies. So, for instance, every pathogen has a unique frequency. And he can identify the frequency and then give it a frequency that it can't live by, and it disassembles. And like, for instance, with me, one of the things he found was that I had Epstein-Barr, and I knew I had Epstein-Barr from blood tests, but he found 200 variants of Epstein-Barr in my body, and he was able to disassemble each one.
Wow.
So that's how profound his work is. And he's helped me through, well, right. I'll have to admit, right now, I've had trouble walking for the last few years, and nobody knows what it's from. So I had an MRI, and I sent him the pictures of the MRI and found that my brain had a benign tumor. And so he found the frequencies of it, and he has disassembled the frequencies, and the brain tumor is shrinking, and I'm doing a lot better now. Actually, I've been able to go for runs that I hadn't been able to do for a couple of years now.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel, Peter.
Yeah, you saw me when I was up
I-
in your place, and I had trouble walking.
Yes, and you just found out the next day that the test had showed that tumor had come in. I was going to ask you off camera, how it was going.
Yeah,
But
I
telling me
recently,
that's
a couple of weeks ago, I went for a run around the reservoir in Central Park.
wow.
Incredible.
Fantastic.
I know.
Now, I asked you for this guy's name before, but you said he's very busy. Will you
Well,
give us his
no,
name?
but it's all right. I mean, he likes it when so his name is Rich Price, Price, and his phone number is, find it here for you. Oops. I'm looking through my phone numbers, and Freedom will appreciate that first phone number that came up was a guy named Aaron Banish. Freedom, do you know who he is?
You bet.
Yeah. All right. Rich Price is 302-393-4523. He's not that expensive, and he works by the hour, but to work with him, you need an initial at least 5 hours for him to find all the things in your system that he has to find. And it's best to text him, not to call him.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. Wow. That's
Yeah, I'd
a
like to share that.
valuable contact.
Thank you, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, we
Yes.
all appreciate that one. what else? Anybody else have a question or something to add to the conversation?
I'm going to ask you, Hope.
Oh, what do you
Now
want
that you know how this couple is doing it, of course, I'm thinking about you and Jim.
to
Does any of
stop
that
recording?
apply? Or you don't even have to answer, but that's a logical question for any couple. I mean, that's the ideal. And
It is, Leonora. Thank you for bringing that up.
good.
No, Peter and Deborah and Jim and I are four happy people together. And there can we could say that Jim and Deborah sit on one side of the aisle and Peter and I sit on the other, but we all break bread together. So
We all appreciate each other. We don't always get each other, but we appreciate each other.
absolutely. And Jim, some of you may know this, went to interfaith ministry for 2 years in New York City. And he and Deborah definitely connect on that level. And Jim is also somebody who marries people, not very often anymore, but for a while in the Berkshires, he was doing that pretty regularly. So there are some parallels for sure here. And I actually, I think there are so many parallels now that I really think about it deeply, because Jim was not of this persuasion at all for a long time. And I had, when I broke up with my previous boyfriend to Jim, I had made a vow that I would no longer try to convert anybody that I was in a relationship with. That no matter how they came to the relationship, I would accept it and I would not try to steer them to the higher ground. Well, I really stuck by that. It was hard. And I had to, because I'm a, you know who I am. I want to share the good news. So it was hard to do that, but it was a good lesson, because everybody, I respect the fact that everybody comes at their own pace and at their own inner prodding to ask the questions, ask the big questions. And so I bit my tongue through so many times. But then what happened was I discovered dowsing, and oh boy, that really set the house on fire, because I picked up those rods and it was like I got like Bach finding his piano. Or harpsichord. I just started in, and it was easy for me, and everything opened and finally I had the courage to tell him about what I was doing with my little bent hangers in the closet. And he thought, of course, I was cuckoo. But what started to happen was the things that I doused about actually turned out to be the right, the beneficial, more beneficial path. So over time, he sort of got indoctrinated, and at the same time listened to Wayne Dyer and things like that. And slowly but surely he came along, and now he doesn't go to the places I go to, needless to say, but he respects them, like Peter and Deborah respect each other in this way, and he seeks my counsel for certain situations, especially with my dowsing. So, and he loves to go on my trips, or wherever we go, to go, find these antiquities that I'm so partial to. He loves it. He loves it. So, that's where we are pretty much.
I want to say that your dowsing taught me something that I really needed to add, because watching you with your L rods, I got to experience more of the gradations of positive, negative, and yes and no. in more subtle ways than I had used it before. And so, because I do a lot of digital dowsing with my fingers, and they're not as subtle
Right.
as you. So I've always been interested in pendulums and using pendulums. But now what I like to do with my pendulum, when I ask it a question, it gives me gradations.
Mm.
And I use dowsing charts that have gradations on them.
Yeah.
And so I'm much more particular now of how much of a yes it is, or how much of a no it is, or how strong it
Good.
is.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy to have added that to my practice.
Oh, that's great, Peter. I'm glad to hear it, because we do tend to just seek the yes or no, and not there's so many levels, and I'm glad that your pendulum is actually showing you the nuances, because for me the pendulum doesn't do that as much.
But I use a chart.
But the charts are fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as soon as I get the book out and all of that, then my next project is to plan a dowsing course that will be partially a webinar and partially in person, well, online at least, and to talk about these levels and how we can get at them. And
Yeah.
charts is a great way.
And you'll probably attract people who are better at L-rods than I am. That's why I use a pendulum.
I don't know. I try to span the spectrum and get, we'll see what I get, but I'm glad that was helpful. Anyway, anybody else have a comment or a question they'd like to throw out to these two folks?
I have, oh yeah, good. Talk, because I did already talk. Karen, you got the floor.
Unmute yourself, honey.
Pardon?
There she goes.
Sorry, it's not even a question. I just wanted to chime in on the couple question. Because what I think, and we're kind of in that span of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s of the age. And my husband and I, who had been together almost 50 years, he's passed just a few years ago. But the thing with the couple question that I think is, first of all, that consideration to be together, two very different people. And, like that level of acceptance. We were that way where I'd say I was the one who read all the books. Bob read not a one, but he was the one I would refer to as Buddha Bob. He just had it. He just had that presence. So that part about the couple thing, but I think also then the other thing about the couple question that I so appreciate is that whatever that phrase means, where two or more are gathered, there go I, that thing in between the two people who are able to do that thing that we three couples have been pretty good at is like such an incredible gift to the world in this age. That's all. That's my appreciation for the couple question.
And I think Deb and I are among unique couples.
Well, and not just because of the stuff that we do, but I find this slightly depressing. I think, Karen, that for those of us with long-term marriages, it's so surprising to people.
Yeah.
Right? Which, in this age of divorce rate of, 50 and 60%, to be married for more than 10 or 15 years is considered a big accomplishment, which is kind of sad.
Yeah.
Because I think people think it's easier to bail. I mean, the hardest thing is to sit in a relationship with someone and do your own stuff and own your own stuff and then bring it to the relationship. It's much easier to think. And then the divorce rate for second marriages is even higher. So hello.
I want to go to what you just said, because that speaks to integrity, and that is our theme for the month.
Yeah.
the courage, because, right, we're going to work that in here. The courage to sit in it and maintain the integrity of your own path, your own core, right? And purpose, and be in relationship. Dare to be in relationship. That it takes a lot, doesn't it?
huge.
It does.
Well,
Mhm,
and I've
mhm.
often said, and somebody asked me this recently, whenever I'm interviewed or whenever somebody asks, what do I think is the most important quality or the most important thing to remember to have a successful long-term relationship? I always say, when each side of the partnership is committed to doing their own personal growth, self-discovery work, because
Mhm.
then you bring that to the relationship and you're not
Mhm.
afraid, to step into the shadow of your own self, but also to work through the crap with your partner that they bring. Everybody has baggage. The question is, where do you find them? What's the phrase? Do you want to find someone with matching baggage that that is willing to stay in there and work through that stuff, and as you said, Hope, to stay in your own integrity about who you are and not turn yourself into a pretzel to meet someone else's criteria.
Well, this is where I
Mhm.
think the two of you have been super successful, really, because you're both very strong, and you love each other, and you help each other and do things for each other. You love you do all the things you're supposed to do as husband and wife, but you've maintained yourselves individually beautifully.
Well, I think the relationship is, and even meeting each other is the universe at work, because we were meant to have this and have this life together. And I don't think it's an accident at all. I think it's our souls and the universe working together that we came into this life for.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, Peter.
Oh,
And
yeah.
recently I had an Indian palm leaf reading. Do you know about those?
No.
They're
Yeah, I think didn't you tell us about that?
I think I did.
Visited?
But one of the things that I learned was that I have my what do you my darn it. The word just went out of my mind. Jim is my
Your
God.
catalyst, your
No, soulmate. Thank you.
Oh.
Soulmate.
That was easy.
Oh, yeah.
I kept thinking another word kept popping in and I didn't want to say
I
it.
was thinking of soulmate too. I thought it was too easy.
That's what I thought.
But what I'm hearing, I just wonder about, I haven't had, I'm not in a partnership since a long time. And it's in my astrological chart. There is not one person in my life, in my karma, to be a soulmate.
Well,
But
this is my third marriage.
Oh, but what I'm getting at is you wouldn't be where you're at if you didn't have that
right.
Mhm.
That's
that
the stretching
mirroring
growth.
all that counterpart, which is
Yeah.
so unidentical to you. This is exactly the secret that
Exactly.
Yeah, we've
this
grown
is
each
what's meant
other.
to be.
Yes.
We've grown each other.
Yeah.
That's the stretching and growing side. And then
Right.
the other side is when you want to strangle each other because you're so different.
But we know better.
Yes, we haven't strangled each other yet. We keep stretching and growing most of the time.
Well, my first two wives, my first one actually was about to have me murdered.
We won't go
Oh,
into
let's
that.
not go down there. Let's
Literally.
not go down there, Peter.
But the second one was my wife in my last lifetime, and the trouble we had in that lifetime, we came in this lifetime to have that trouble, and in order to end the karma, so we could get divorced and move on from it.
She prepped you for me.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Wow.
All righty. Well, how are y'all feeling? We're sort of getting towards our 90-minute mark. Anybody have anything else that they'd like to ask or comment on? It's been a great conversation.
Very fun, really, and
Yeah.
delightful. And I
It
love all
exceeded
your
all
comments.
expectations.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you. It was really fun to reconnect with you too and hear what's going on.
Yeah,
Really,
thanks.
cool
Thanks,
stuff.
Freedom.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right,
Mm.
well, we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And Peter and Deborah, I love you. It's really been fun to be with you tonight. And thank you for your honesty. You know, it's a beautiful thing. So until the next time, we are gonna see who's coming to be our infinite wisdom guest next month. I don't even know yet. Find out. Lots of love to you all, and sayonara.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks so
Thanks
much.
all.
Good night,
Thanks,
everybody.
Hope. Thanks, everyone.
Night night. There we go.